So the Pope has been speaking out on the massacre of the innocents. The Palestinians, so far Israel, with American money and bombs and United Nations veto umbrella, has been killing Palestinians every day, left and right. There was protesters, and Kamala was like, shut up! Shut your mouth! And then later on, okay, I'm hearing you. Kind of. I'm listening. I'm saying ceasefire now. I'm not saying an arms embargo. I'm not saying stop giving them bombs and guns. I'm not putting any conditions on it. Now you go ahead and bomb all them damn kids. Here's $23.5 billion. Here's a whole bunch of, guns and tanks and planes. You just take it all. And then, of course, we'll veto anything that the United Nations, the world body, if they say that you did wrong, we got your back. We will cover up your crimes. Don't you worry. So it's interesting that the Catholic Church has actually been speaking out against the war itself. He kind of tries to say both sides in a way. But I'm glad that the Catholic Church is speaking out against it. The Catholic Church was against the Iraq War. Unfortunately, the Catholic Church, a lot of Catholics don't know anything about Jesus, doesn't know shit about the Bible. They couldn't quote anything. They don't know what the hell the Catholic structure, the religion, it's just shut up. It's just blind obedience to authority. And so it's incredible how ignorant Catholics are of their own Pope and their own Catholic institutions. What? What did you say? The Pope said something. I don't care about no Pope. Poop on the Pope. Pope, poop. Isn't that funny? Pope, pooping, the pooping Pope. So the Pope said a lot of interesting stuff. I just want to mention it because I know that the Catholics probably aren't talking about it, or the priests are speaking, some kind of religious-y, some kind of, gibberish, so it's not crystal clear what the Pope is saying. But at least he says one thing. He prays for the Palestinians. He prays for Israel. He prays for Palestine a bunch. That's a pretty good, way. If you're a religious person, well, I am praying that there's peace. And he also said anytime that there is war, then humanity has lost. I mean, these are fantastic little quotes. Now, he's saying all ideology is bad. Ideology is bad, which is interesting. What about Christianity? Isn't that an ideology? But he was saying, the question was, are you anti-Semitic? What do you think about Palestine? And he was like, don't be anti-Semitic. Don't be anti-Palestine. Don't be anti any group of people, any group or nations of people. Do not be anti-people. What about anti-racist? What about anti-criminals? What about anti-rapists? He calls for a ceasefire. He prays a bunch. He says all ideology is bad. Now, Israel's losing its pious righteousness mystique, right? Woodrow Wilson and Harry Truman, they read the Bible a bunch. I heard that Christian Zionism actually preceded Jewish Zionism by 50 years, which is amazing. Christian Zionism is predating, modern Christian Zionism predates Jewish Zionism. What in the hell is going on? I don't understand a lot of this stuff. Jewish Zionism comes after Christian Zionism. Why would the Christians want to protect the Judaism? Why would they want to? That doesn't make the Old Testament. Jesus was very much the new coming. I mean, if you're a Christian, you believe you'll go to heaven if you're a Christian. You believe in God through Jesus and the Holy Trinity. And so to say, wait a second. No, we need to know about Jephthah and Hadika and Smorgasbord olio. We need to know about Smorgasbord. So the last phase of European colonization, you had all this overthrow of European colonization, but the establishment of Israel in 1948 would be the last phase of European colonization. It almost looks like it's a white supremacy project, because why do they keep killing the Palestinians? Why can't they just leave the Palestinians alone? Because they're Muslim? Because they got a different religion? Because they got brown skin? This isn't even proportional in the least bit. 200,000 have been killed versus what? 2,000? So if 1,000 equals 100,000, then an eye for an eye makes the world blind. This is such a severe overreaction. It's not even fucking funny. It's not even fucking funny. And then apparently not only does America support Israel a bunch, but so does Australia and Canada. So Australia and Canada and America, we are settler colonial societies. Why do settler colonial, my God, this shit's going to get us fucking nuked. This shit is getting us nuked. Americans can pretend that this shit isn't happening, but the rest of the world sees it. This is the most documented genocide the world's ever seen. I mean, my God, you haven't seen the heads just falling on. You haven't seen the dead bodies up in the rafters, the rubble, and the jaws. It's gross. The way that their skin's just being ripped off and falling apart. And even if you said, like, somehow the men, Hamas, or the military is somehow responsible, what the fuck are the kids? This is massacre of the innocents. I thought that America would clearly be against a massacre of the innocents. And aren't we a Christian nation? So why the hell would we support the Jewish country doing this shit? You're supposed to treat your neighbor as yourself. Israel's not treating their neighbor as they would want themselves to be treated. They are treating their neighbors way differently. Way differently. So it doesn't make any sense. If you were actually Christian, it would seem as though you would be against the massacre of the innocents. Isn't that what King Herod did? That's what Pharaoh did to the Hebrews. And then King Herod did it to Bethlehem, the massacre of the innocents. So let's go on with the Pope. The Pope said some other things. What did he say? He also... Let's see. All ideology is bad. Let's see. Pope continued with an appeal to continue negotiations for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza throughout the region so that the hostages may be freed, returned to their anxiously awaiting loved ones, so that the civilian population may have a safe access to necessary and urgent humanitarian aid. I carry the pain and suffering of Palestinians and Israelis in my heart, said Pope Francis. Expressing grief for the thousands of dead, the wounded, the displaced, the immense destruction that wreaks pain and suffering on the small and defenseless who see their future compromised, Pope Francis called on all men and women of goodwill to raise their cry for peace. Speaking during the Angelus in St. Peter's Square, he asked, "Do we really think we are building a better world in this way? Enough, please. Let us all say enough, please," he repeated. "Stop the war. Stop the war. I encourage the continuation of negotiations for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and throughout the region. Do not forget tormented Ukraine." So he's not just saying, look at the situation in Gaza, but he's also saying, look at Ukraine, where many people die every day. It's a place of great sorrow. During the Angelus on the solemnity of the Assumption, Pope Francis entrusts the worry and sorrow of people suffering due to conflict and war to Mary, Queen of Peace. He recalls the grave humanitarian crisis in Gaza and remembers all the peoples of the Middle East, Ukraine, Sudan, and Myanmar. So, Ukraine, Sudan, Myanmar. And there's something happening in Ethiopia and Somalia. The Congo, there's some shit going down in the Congo. So, it's not just Gaza. I continue to follow with concern the very serious humanitarian situation in Gaza, and I call once again for 200,000. I call again for a ceasefire on all fronts, for the release of the hostages, and for aid to the exhausted population. I encourage everyone to make every effort to ensure that the conflict does not escalate and to pursue paths of negotiation so that this tragedy ends soon. Let us not forget war is a defeat. War itself is a defeat. That's what the Pope, the leader of the Catholic Church, is saying. War itself is a defeat. He keeps on praying, and he prays, and he cares about the Palestinians. He cares about the Israelis. Cornel West says something similar. He says that a baby from Tel Aviv is just as important from a baby from Bethlehem. O little town of Bethlehem, how still we see the lie. I continue to follow with concern. I call once again for a ceasefire on all fronts, for the release of the hostages, for aid to the exhausted population. I encourage everyone to make every effort to ensure that the conflict does not escalate and to pursue passive negotiation so that this tragedy ends soon. Let us not forget war is a defeat. Pope Francis says his thoughts goes to those facing wars, especially children who have forgotten how to smile. There's even kids who forgot how to smile. And actually, they don't have the energy to go and get the water and food for themselves, let alone smile. And smiling takes like 7 muscles, and the frown takes 34 muscles. So it's actually easier to smile than it is to frown. I appeal once again that access to humanitarian aid be ensured to Gaza, and call once more for the prompt release of the hostages seized on last October 7th, and for an immediate ceasefire in the Strip. He said, let us not allow the current hostilities to continue to have grave repercussions on the civil population, by now at the limit of its endurance, and above all on the children. Yeah, the limit of its endurance. I mean, my God, how does Palestine, how are they not bursting at the seams? How is Palestine not bursting at the seams? And above all on the children. They're already living in refugee camps. They keep bombing the refugee camps. Well, they are poor and they are catching polio and they don't have any water and they don't have any food. What do you think they need? What would Jesus do? What would Moses do? Murder, murder, murder. Wait a second. Is that in the Bible? Bunch of genocide? Can the Bible be a book of genocide? That can't be right. Jesus was such a good guy. Why would the Old Testament just be a bunch of genocide? I've read the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments is logical. It makes sense. He said in a speech that touched on the plight of the Haitians and the Rohingya and victims of human trafficking. So, victims of human trafficking, Rohingya, Haiti, Ukraine, Sudan, Myanmar. How much suffering we see in the eyes of children. The children have forgotten to smile in those war zones. With their eyes, the children ask us, why? Why all this death? Why all this destruction? War is always an absurdity and a defeat. So I'm sure the Catholics already knew all this because, I mean, they're all about being informed, being educated, understanding the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's